Hi, this is Catherine. This is Taking Tea with Catherine, and this is Jane's Garden, which is a green tea from Harney and Sons with a bit of floral bits mixed in. I really like it. It's making me think a little bit of spring, which too soon, much too soon. This is another episode of Tea and Mystery, and so there's a bit of tea as well as mystery in this one, besides just what I'm drinking. So we'll get to that in a moment, but I noticed by the third mystery that I've been reading that the books had something in common, and that is that these novels are all the first of a series. So I'm beginning a bunch of new series. Does it mean I'm going to continue? Well, we'll see. I still have another bunch of books out of the library that are the first in series, but I also have some that are continuing. So I don't think that I'm going to repeat that again in February, but in January, yeah, it was all new to me. And not all these books are new. Actually, only one of them was written recently. The rest were not ancient, but not, in my lifetime, but definitely not the past year or so. So I will start with, I think, the one I'm least likely, even though it was the last one I read, the one I'm least likely to continue in. And when I say that, it doesn't mean that I won't. I just don't see it happening anytime soon, just based on what I read. And I think that's a decent judgment. And that is Murder Past Due, a Cat in a Stacks mystery by Miranda James. It is considered a best-selling series. I saw so many pictures of this cat in different stages of looking at books and being around books. And I love cats. I like the cat in the series. That alone would maybe make me want to keep reading, but there were a lot of things that I didn't care for. So the story itself wasn't terrible. The main character is a guy named Charlie, who I think is around 50 years old. He used to live in this town called Athena in, I think, Mississippi. Yes, Mississippi. And there's a university, or a college, whatever. He works at a library doing kind of like archiving and working with old paper, stuff like that, which sounds kind of cool. It's a bit of a part-time job, so seems to have a decent life. He has this cat, Diesel, who is a Maine Coon, who is very big, and sorry about that, the allergies again. Just talking about a cat makes my allergies go up. Yes, I know, I have 3 cats. Back to Diesel. He's young, he's going to grow bigger, and Charlie, I keep thinking, is his name Charlie? Yeah, his name is Charlie. Walks Diesel on a leash, and everybody in town, almost everybody in town seems to love this cat. The cat makes little sound effects, sounds like a fun cat to have. Doesn't really help solve the mystery. That's fine, because I don't, I've had mysteries with cats in them. They don't need to actually help. But I like the idea of it. It brings me back to the 90s when I used to read a lot of that sort of thing. This, you could tell around about when this was written. I think it was about 10 or so years ago. Oh, I just realized my nails are ink stained. Sorry about that. So there are some things that even now feel a little bit, not antiquated, but just a little bit older now when it comes to technology, which is, that's the problem with anything in the past 40 years, is that technology changes so much that when you're talking about anything computer related or phone related, it just seems so different. Whereas if you read something that happened in like the 1930s, it's like, everything is, a long time ago. So it doesn't seem outdated. It just seems vintage. I don't know if it makes sense at all. But that didn't bother me at all, in this story. So anyway, Charlie is a widower. He inherited a house from his aunt, and it seems like a big enough house. He has a boarder, this kid named, I think his name is Justin, and there's a lot of people with J names in this book, who is about 18, goes to college. It makes no sense to me why this kid lives with him, because his parents live nearby, and I know there's some issues in the family, but it just seemed like, why? Oh, so he can concentrate in a quiet environment. Yeah, I guess so. But I think it was just for furthering the plot. This kid is really sensitive and kind of seems like young for his age, but that happens. So in the middle of all this, there is a man who was a best-selling thriller writer, very wealthy, very arrogant, who used to go to school with Charlie and a lot of people in the neighborhood. Wasn't very well liked by a lot of people in the neighborhood. Bit of a ladies' man, and he's coming back to visit, and there's going to be an event, involving him later on in the day. But Charlie encounters him early because there's a matter of documents that this man wants to, have donated to this college, library, etc. It's not that fascinating, but it's okay. It does lead to some of the plot movement, I guess. But there's a lot of things that come up in the course between that time and the end of the day when this man, I think his name is Godfrey. Yes, Godfrey dies. He's obviously murdered. Charlie finds the body. But his boarder might be implicated, so there's a whole bunch of Charlie's trying to protect this kid, which I understand, but it's kind of like he interferes a little bit in the investigation. Yes, he helps with the investigation as well, but a lot of times I almost feel like, it seemed a little bit more mind your own business than, I know that really happens in a lot of these mysteries. There's always somebody who's not always a detective who gets involved in helping to solve the mystery. The problem is there's a lot of talk about these papers, and at one point something happens where some stuff related to papers goes missing. That is never resolved. It is never resolved. All we have is this guy Charlie who talks about everything he does in his day, which isn't necessarily bad, occasionally, but it was just so many details that weren't necessary. And him just talking to people, sticking his nose where it doesn't belong, kind of, in a friendly way with, I know he's trying to help, and he's got this cat that helps everybody talk because he's so cute or whatever. I'm just jealous because I can't take my cats for walks. It probably would be annoying, though, to do that, because then they would expect it. And if I wanted a dog. But anyway, and then when it's solved at the ending, okay, this happens, this is a person who did it. Basically, this is why they did it, but it's not a lot of explanation, and it doesn't tie things together. It just sort of ends almost abruptly. It's like, okay, it's over now. And again, it wasn't the worst thing I read, but I kind of thought, well, what do I have to do to find out? Do I have to read the next book? Are they going to talk about what happened in this book? Because most series don't do that. They'll refer to things, but they won't tell you exactly what happened because they don't want you to get spoiled, usually. So I feel like it wasn't really wrapped up, and there were a lot of unanswered questions. So I gave it 3 stars, which some parts of it were better than that, some not as good. But yeah, it just, I don't know. It wasn't tidy, if that makes sense. And I'm not the tidiest person, as you can imagine, but I don't know. So anyway, here's the next book that was again, in order of which one I'd be more likely to read next. And this one is from a writer that I've read before and and that's Vicki Delany, who writes the Sherlock Holmes mysteries, Sherlock Holmes bookshop mysteries, which I've talked about a lot on this channel. And so this is a Tea by the Sea mystery. Tea by the Sea is the name of this tea room, and this is the first one, Tea and Treachery. I think this is the only one out. I could be wrong. There might be a second one. But this one came out, I think, in 2020, so look at that teapot really close up. It both reminds me of this tea room I went to, this bakery I went to that afternoon tea in London that I liked many years ago. It also reminds me of this dress that became very trendy in the summer, the strawberry dress. There's a whole, if you look into the strawberry dress this summer, there was a whole thing that went into its popularity and people trying to copy it. And I don't even care about fashion anymore, but that was just bizarre. Anyway, nothing to do with this story. So this also, just like the Sherlock Holmes bookshop series, this also takes place in Cape Cod, another place that I'd like to visit someday. And I love the picture. Wouldn't you just love to be there right now? I would. Anyway, I have missed going out to tea so much. I can have tea at home and I do good with it, but man, it's different to go out. So there's Lily Roberts, who is originally from New York, who has been studying, been a chef type of, I don't know if she wasn't the head chef, but she worked in restaurants, very good cook. I'm not really that versed in like restaurant terminology beyond, waiter, waitress, that kind of thing. But anyway, she has a lot of knowledge in cooking. So she moves to Cape Cod, where her grandmother owns a B&B, a bed and breakfast, called Victoria by the Sea. Her grandmother was originally from England, and she needs to have a B&B because she can't afford to just live in this place. But it's sort of her retirement home, as it were. So Lily actually makes the breakfast in the morning, and she then later in the day, like in the afternoon, runs this tea room, which is all in the same area, the same property, and which sounds like it's pretty new, but it's pretty successful. It focuses on afternoon tea. I was slightly put off because the author seems to have consulted some tea experts, and when they're describing preparing the afternoon tea, they talked of putting having teapots, which is good, but putting the tea in a tea ball and not really describing what the tea ball is. So if it's the typical one, it's not that big. It's like, I don't know. Which is fine for some teas, but a lot of teas need to kind of expand and move in the teapot. And so I kind of said, man, if you're an expert on tea, wouldn't you know that? But I don't know. But at least they knew what afternoon tea was, as opposed to high tea. So as a tea snob, a slight tea snob, I'm not like the biggest tea snob. But yeah, it just was a little, not off-putting, but just a little like my confidence wasn't as strong as it would normally be. But anyway, so in the beginning of the story, Rose, who's kind of this feisty, I don't like the word feisty, but older woman, but she's always speaks her mind kind of person, is, there. And Lily is running this tea room, and her friend, Bernie, I think her name is, her friend comes from New York to stay for a little bit so she can work on a novel. I don't know anyone who has that kind of luxury, but that's okay because it furthers the plot. And there is a property nearby that looks to be getting purchased by someone who's like a real estate developer, kind of shady, and he seems to be getting permission from the counselors of the town and all kinds of people to rebuild and make maybe a golf resort, which sounds nice as far as business for the area, but maybe not so great for Rose, who is very vocal about her dislike of this situation. So when the developer is dead, shortly after, people are looking at Rose. So Lily ends up getting pulled in with her friend to sort of investigate what happened. So that's how she gets involved. I'm sure that's how it's going to keep going, and that's fine. So, which was kind of fine, except, like I said, the story was good. But Lily is so busy. Like from morning to evening and later, she is constantly working, cooking, preparing things. She talks about this little break she gets between making the breakfast and going to the tea room. And it almost always gets interrupted. And I know people are busy and that's fine, but it actually stressed me out. Like it stressed me out. She was so busy and yet she kept getting pulled away. She kept having to deal with 10 things at once. Meanwhile, this gardener shows up, this new gardener who's kind of attractive, and so she's dealing with him too. He's very nice and helpful, so you feel like, is there going to be a romantic situation here? Possibly. And that's nice. So I could see how the series could be good, but I just feel like I really hope that it doesn't continue with this. I am so stressed. I am so busy. I could barely, I was about to just have a bite of my scone when someone interrupted me. And it was like, I don't need this kind of fast pace. Isn't that what you leave New York for? I don't know. And as always, when there are places that are not very large and you don't see a lot of murders happening, and then suddenly it's the beginning of a series and a lot of murders are going to be happening, you're like, how is that? Like even going back to Murder Past Due, they actually mention how there have been in the past decade, there was maybe one murder in all that time. And so you're like, now is it going to be every book? That, it kind of, I don't know. I know that's the whole premise of cozy mysteries, and I love cozy mysteries, but I still think I'm going to read the next one when it comes out, but I just don't think I'm going to be as excited as I have been with the Sherlock Holmes bookshop. Oh, Janie's here. She knows I'm drinking a tea with her name on it. But anyway, you probably won't see her because my cats are very camera shy lately. So last but not least is Maisie Dobbs by Jacqueline Winspear. And this has been around for a while too. Let me see. I saw it and I forgot it because my memory is very bad. I saw the copyright and, sorry, I'm flipping through pages and they are stuck together. Okay, 2003. So I mean, oh, there's Janie. It's not ancient, but it's been around for a while. There are quite a few Maisie Dobbs books, and I bought this. I mentioned this recently. I bought this in Barnes & Noble in the summer of 2019, kind of on a whim. It was on sale, and I said, oh, this could be, everybody tells me this is such a great series, and it is so far. I really did like it. The second one I don't own. I might just take it out of the library, because if I buy every book in the series that is not, you know, Sherlock Holmes, I will have no space. I will be entirely broke. I will have to sell off Janie to the highest bidder. Anyway, so Maisie Dobbs is, I don't know how to describe it, but I felt like it was, in my opinion, like a combination of Foyle's War, even though it's a bit earlier, like the later part of Foyle's War, after the war, usually, Downton Abbey, and maybe the Mary Russell Sherlock Holmes series by Laurie King, I think. Because Maisie Dobbs is this person who grew up, she was highly intelligent, but, you know, not in the best circumstances to further her education. She ends up working in, you know, in a house as a maid for a lady, and ends up taking on, getting a mentor via this lady, who is this guy. I should just say the names, Maurice Blanche, but I can't remember names today. It's this Hat. I'm going to blame the Hat. He's like an investigator. I don't know how to describe him, because this takes place mostly during like the golden age of detective fiction, even though it wasn't written then. So he could be like a combination of a lot of the detectives of that time. Very intelligent. But he sort of trains Maisie over the years to not just, you know, in learning the art of detection, but also in just a varied education. So that was pretty cool. And that happens in what I call the Downton Abbey years, because a lot of that time period happens once she is working for this lady. And around the same time as the Downton Abbey series took place. So World War I hits, and it involves everybody. Now this is the backstory, which comes into the book. So it doesn't start out that way. It starts out in the late 1920s, when Maisie Dobbs is setting up her own business, consulting, and she has a client that asks her to look into somebody, and in the midst of this investigation, she gets drawn into this story of people who were damaged both physically and mentally from the war, and a place that a lot of them end up going to, and what happens to them after that. So this special kind of retreat place and what gets involved with that. So I don't want to give away any more than that, because I could give away spoilers. So it starts out with that, and then suddenly it goes back to 1910 and goes for like almost a decade after that. But you learn a lot about wartime. I mean, if you didn't know about wartime and what went into it, Maisie Dobbs, it's established pretty early on that she did serve as a nurse in the war. So she has a lot of different types of experience. So I think this is going to turn out to be a good series if it continues on this vein. Maybe not as many flashbacks, because there's just so many you could do at this point. But she has a man who sort of assists her in certain things, and he's kind of like this jolly kind of Cockney guy. So it's a little stereotypical in places, but I don't think I really minded that, because sometimes you have to have a little bit of that. But it was an intriguing story, a lot about what war does to people, a lot of interpersonal relationships that are explored. Not entirely realistic, like I said. Someone from her class to get any kind of recognition from a higher class. It was already kind of not realistic at Downton Abbey, but it's really not here either. But still a good story, and not entirely impossible. A lot of London, which the other two books that I read weren't, so, you know, I like a little bit of London in my mystery, or England, or whatever, so that's nice too. Yeah, I liked it, and I can't wait to read the second one. Hopefully, maybe in March, we'll see. So that will be good. All in all, none of the beginnings of the series blew me away, but I do think that Maisie Dobbs has potential. When I say the Mary Russell series, I know I didn't explain too much but I've talked about it before on this channel. She is, I think American, or at least part American, who comes to know Sherlock Holmes right before World War I and is sort of mentored by him, and then they end up being partners, etc. as time goes on. And she was kind of extraordinarily intelligent. So that's really where that comparison goes with Maisie Dobbs. Otherwise, they don't have much in common, because Mary Russell was very wealthy and Maisie wasn't. But I think if they met each other, they would get on. I hope. You know, I don't think that'll happen, crossover, but what can you say? So that's all for the books that I read in January of the mystery genre. I will show you what I have going, or at least I started, that are, wait, this isn't, I'll only show you one, because the other one is actually not quite right. I started The Secret Book and Scone Society by Ellery Adams. See, it is the very first book in a series. I don't know how I feel about it yet, but I like the fact that it takes place in a bookshop and that there are scones involved. So I will talk about this if I finish it next month in my Tea and Mystery. For now, this is Catherine at Taking Tea with Catherine. If you have anything to say about any of these books, please let me know in the comments below what you thought. If you want to read these, or if you read further into some of these series, and should I keep going? Any of the above below. So until then, have a lovely tea and book-filled day.